Oh, welcome back my friends for another fun reloading video. Today is going to be part 2 with our brand new 357 Magnum series. And today is all about case prep. I have to start by full length sizing all of my cases here. And then we have to trim and then finish with the chamfer and deburr and clean up those case mouths. And then we're also going to scrape out the primer pockets and clean those up a little bit as well. And then finally we'll go and tumble them in the walnut media just to get off some of that lube as well as the brass shavings and anything else. And then we'll have brand new fresh cases ready to rock. So we have shell holder number 1. Goes right down there in the bottom of our press. We have our die up top. With our ram raised, we shall lower this until we contact our shell holder. Give a slight cam over and lock our ring. There we go with the old school lead lock ring that doesn't suck. Haha. It's also important to note before moving any further, we've inspected our cases thoroughly for any cracks, separations anywhere, anything weird. And like I showed earlier in the first video, we found that Hornady case that was built for the FTX cartridges. Whoops. And like we found earlier in the first video, that Hornady case built for the FTX loads has a different overall length, so we need to find stuff like that and separate those and sort that stuff out, and all of that's done before we get any further here. So that's been done. Now I'm going to lube these up. You don't normally have to lube up your straight wall pistol cases, but I just cleaned out my dies and I'm still enjoying the lanolin alcohol mixture, so we're going to do some of that just to give it a light coat to help it out. So let's get on with it. I have a Ziploc bag here. I'm just going to dump the brass in, and then I'm going to spray it a few times with my lanolin mixture. I'll make sure to be really loud. And there's already some in the bag, but we'll go ahead and spray it a few more times. Here's my $2 sprayer from Amazon. We got some lanolin in there mixed with some alcohol. You shake it up really well. And then you make sure your nozzle is on misty mode instead of, fire hose mode. And we'll just give it a few spritzes. Kind of roll these around. We'll put them back in our container here so they can dry off and let that alcohol evaporate. And we'll just give that a minute to rest there. So our alcohol has had time to evaporate. You can now feel that nice, slippery, natural lubricant. And that should just help our newly cleaned die size that case there. And you can see the die only gets down to about that far, which should be fine. Let's try to plunk it into our cylinder here and see if it works for us. And we'll just try to drop it into our cylinder, and it ejects, falls right in and out, no problem at all. There it goes, and that's the done pile, dummy. Over there, not that one. And if you're unaware, lanolin is a great natural moisturizer used in lots of makeups and girly stuff, but it makes your rough hands from using all these gross chemicals all day actually feel a little bit better. But you still want to wash your hands when you're done. But it's certainly not going to hurt you at all. Why are we stuck here now? Did our primer eject? Maybe the rim is bent? Come on. Okay. Seems like we got some pretty nasty scrapage there. Maybe that's getting caught. We'll just set this one aside here and see what we want to do with it later. But that's part of that sorting thing I was mentioning earlier. I guess we need to look better at our rims there. So far, this is going pretty well. And although we have a carbide sizing die, you know, like I said, a little bit of lubrication never hurts. And I just dumped that one back into the wrong pile. There we are. And I didn't mention in the first video, but for our primers, we can be using standard or Magnum, both depending on the powder and on the load. If we're just using those lighter 38 special loads with faster burning powders, lower pressures, our standard pistol primers are going to be just fine. But if we're using the much slower burning stuff like, you know, Accurate number 9 or H110, we might have to use Magnum primers for those, both being higher pressure and slower burning. That one's got kind of a crooked case mouth. Let's see what it looks like. Just a little bump on this guy, but we'll probably trim it and that'll get buffed right out. Okay, that rim felt a little sticky. Let's see how it acts. Actually, yeah, it didn't want to go all the way in, but let's see. Yeah. I'll set him aside too. I bet it's probably the same. This is an AUSA. Who is that? Armscore? Both of them are Armscore brass at this point, so maybe I'll need to cull those out. But this one went just fine. That one is Armscore. Who knows, man? So I'm going to knock all these out real quick, and we will get on with our next steps here in just a minute. Another crappy rim. I don't even want to fight it. Another Armscore. Not going into our shell holder properly. But that time it slid right in. Could be user error. And there's our last piece there, fully sized. These are all ready to go, deprimed. They're what I believe to be once fired, as far as I can tell. So now that we have fully sized them, we need to trim. And for that, we have a couple of options. And also I ended up with 3 of those Armscore cases, and I'm just going to throw these in the trash because they're fighting with my shell holder, and they're actually sort of bent here on the case head itself. So I don't know what these got shot from, but I don't want to risk anything or, you know, mess around with bent up, boogered up brass. So we're going to just toss it in the trash and move on. So now for trimming, which is supposed to be done after you've sized your case. That way if the brass is going to stretch while sizing, you trim it after that instead of trimming it, sizing it, and it's stretching again and then having to trim once more. So here we go. If you're just getting started, you know, it can be kind of expensive to get all the gear, but these Lee length gauges and shell holders make it very affordable. You have to get your cartridge specific case length gauge, and then you can get different cutters, such as the old wooden ball or your standard cutter there. And they also make a Magnum sized cutter, which is a little bit fatter in diameter. And they also come with a shell holder, which I'll have to grab here in a second. And as you can see, I've got a whole box full of them. You know, pretty much one for each cartridge I reload for. And they add up pretty quickly. And here we have the number 1 already installed from 38 Special. So all I'm gonna have to do is put our gauge here into our ball and we'll be good to go. And then after we trim it down to length, we need to clean up the case mouth with our multi-tool here. We can get the inside and then the outside of the case mouth. So here it says our trim to length is 1.27 to 1.29 inches. Let's trim a few and see what happens, or if it even contacts our cases and they don't even need trimmed. I could also just measure them and test it, but I'm going to have it attached to this while I'm chamfering and deburring anyways, so I like having it already mounted up and ready to go regardless of whether it gets trimmed or not. And these are going to be really tight getting them in. Sometimes you'll have to use some pliers. Make sure you grab up here though before it gets to the part that's contacting your case, because if you were to scratch up this part, that's not going to hurt anything. But if you're scratching it up where it contacts the case, that could leave some unwanted burrs and some other nasty stuff. And here it's designated 357. We have our shell holder already installed on the shell holder, which you can chuck up into a drill. You lock it down and then you hold this. Woo! Saves a lot of time, but we're going to do a couple by hand and then I'm actually going to show you the automated process. Lock that down. And we're not even trimming. But I'm already attached, so we'll hit it here just to touch it up. And here. And then when we take it out, I have to find my primer pocket scraper. I'm going to clean up the primer pocket real quick, and then this piece will be 100% ready to go back into the tumbler and then be fired once polished. So here we have our Lee primer pocket scraper. It's got the large and the small sizes, and we'll just kind of run it through here a few times. Clean up some of that gunk. And I would say that's an improvement, right? So we'll do a few of them manually here, and then we'll kick it up to the automated process, right? See, now that was 5 cases and that only took about a minute or so. I don't know, I wasn't actually timing it. But my hands are way sore and tired. So you know what? We're gonna go ahead and plug in the old Frankfurt Arsenal Case Prep Center. Up here we have our case gauge stuck onto the Lee threaded adapter here with the cutter. And then we've got our 2 tools to chamfer and deburr the mouth. And finally the primer pocket scraper to finish that out. So we can check our trim length here. We're right at 1.278, 1.278, 1.28, 1.279, 1.2, 1.28. So they're all pretty consistent, right within the gauge and within the spec. And we're doing this mostly so we can have a consistent crimp with all of our cases, whether it's lead or into a jacketed bullet. Having a consistently set crimp is important for your revolvers and especially your Magnums. So we have a couple left here, maybe 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 of them. And I also forgot about the nickel cases I had hiding in the little ammo box there. So I'm going to have to size those once we finish with the brass ones. But no big deal. And then I'll disregard the one Hornady case and turn it into 38 special. Someday, I don't know. But some of these are not getting trimmed at all. Some of them are getting quite a bit trimmed. And this is why we want to uniform everything, because these crimps would have been way all over the place in terms of neck tension and pressure being put into your bullets. Especially the cast ones, you can deform them much easier. But when everything's the same length, it goes up into the crimping die the same. It gets the same amount of pressure put on it. So we will be much more consistent from here on out. And this is probably something we only have to do once in the lifetime of something like this. If anything, our primer pockets might go out first, but that's total speculation. But we'll probably get several firings out of them before it gets too out of whack. And if we have to trim them again, then so be it. But I don't see it being an issue for quite some time, so I'm going to do it one time and be done with it. As far as I can tell. So we'll just finish up here and get to the nickel cases, and I'll get back with you. Okay, and we now have 19 cases left. I just sized all of our nickel pieces. So let's finish this up here. Doesn't take too long. We'll see how long these 19 pieces take. Just for reference, And I'll sort them back out by head stamp after we tumble everything. So between sizing and trimming and fully prepping our brass, I'm only touching it 2 times. Not including picking it up from the range and then sorting it. In the initial tumbling, I'm just meaning fully prepped brass with only 2 handlings. It's pretty efficient. If only I had a 650 all decked out or a 1050, then you could fully prep your brass and never touch it because it comes from a case feeder. But this is probably about as efficient as I can make my own brass prep. Which is cool with me. It's not too bad, because once again, we'll probably never have to trim any of these ever again. I keep hitting the camera, but, we'll probably live. Oop, didn't tighten that one quite enough. There we go. I feel like some of these nickel cases have been hardened maybe a little more. They seem more brittle, like they want to catch on the teeth here of the cutter. I don't know if that's part of the finishing process, or if they're actually known to have a lesser case life. I don't know. That one doesn't even need trimmed. But it feels really hard when you put it on the cutter or the deburr, chamfering tools, that sort of thing. Or maybe they've already been fired about 5 times. Who knows? Once again, that's why I want to start over with a straight baseline. Same measurements across the board. I mean, we could even be stupid and weight sort them. Or, you know, measure their capacity or something. We could get ridiculous with it. That could be sort of fun. Except I've already punched out all the primers, so we'll have to fire them before we can measure any sort of capacity. Five more here. Three more. I keep wanting to pull it off during the wrong step, and then I keep bumping into the camera. But here we are on our very last one, folks. Bump the camera again. Inside, outside. Primer pocket. Boom. And here we have a beautiful piece of Federal 357. All cleaned up nicely. We are going to do a final tumble on these to knock off any lube or little shavings. And we'll be good to go here, I'll tell you what now. So there we are, folks. We have all of our cases prepped and ready to go. That was sized, trimmed. We cleaned up the case mouths with a chamfer and deburr around the inside and outside. And then we scraped those primer pockets clean. So these are ready to go. We are gonna, however, tumble them one more time, but that's for another video because there's 10,000 ways to tumble your brass and everyone has their preference. So I won't get into that today. So we're gonna call it good to go for now. Stay tuned for more with our 357 Magnum series here. It's gonna get really cool. We're gonna be testing all kinds of different bullets and powders, both with a 4-inch barrel and a 16-inch carbine. So that's going to be really fun to see how those group and perform differently out of the different firearms. So I'm excited about that. Make sure to check me out over on Instagram. That is at DummyRoundOfficial. Stay tuned for more, folks. We will see you in the next video. Have a good one.